And welcome again to another episode of Don't Be a Doorstop. We've changed our editing, so it's like one person at a time. And that means that basically when I take a sip from the mug, then you don't see me because I'm not speaking. So I need to speak and also have the mug. So,
unless you tell me so I could post do it, just you silently sipping as I'm talking.
What do they do? Is it that SMAR or whatever when they just speak quietly? You just hear me sipping a drink, so... You know, if you want to subscribe to our Insider account, then basically we'll do slow sipping of drinks for you to enjoy, to relax you. So, I had a dream of Tide last night. Do you ever dream of people that have passed away and they turn up in your dreams and you hug them in your dreams, or you? I do remember one time I basically cried in my dream. I didn't cry in real life. I cried in my dream. That's the only time where I get to show that kind of emotion, it seems.
Nice.
No, I do cry in real life, but...
I don't know if I've seen people pass away in dreams. Normally in dreams, I find that people tell me off. So even if they did pass away, I don't think I'd want to see them because they'd probably just tell me off in my dream.
It was like super vivid as well. So it must have been that I woke up again and I basically saw him like proper, and he had a real cool, slick looking like haircut and everything. And I was like, oh, it's good to see. And like you hug somebody in your dream. You know, I'm sure there's some psychological like release or like relaxing feeling that you get when you get to resolve. That's the word I'm looking for. When you get to resolve something, right? If you've not been able to say bye or whatever, you get to resolve it in some sort of a dream mechanism, which then is almost, it's not the same, but it's almost the same in some ways. But yeah, so that's it's always good to have dreams like that, positive dreams, and not like nightmares. Are you still having nightmares?
I've not had any recently, which is good. I think I've been sleeping better. But I think that's because it's Megan's half term, so we're not needing to have the 6 o'clock alarm. Which is
the 6 a.m.
Yeah.
I do find dreams are an interesting space for one. I remember someone used to say, like, before going to bed, pray that you are given ideas in your dreams. And like pray for like, oh, give me £1 million idea, or you can go to bed and then your subconscious works on it. But I was thinking about like, you know, some of the same ideas or same concepts come from what if like the past version of yourself would come and say hi to you, or the future version of yourself comes and say hi to you. What would you do? Because obviously it was my birthday a couple of days back, and I was thinking like, now I'm 33. What would like 35 or 37-year-old or 40-year-old Dan come back and tell 33-year-old Dan? So while I'm saying what I think is for me, like, what would you say for you? Because for me, I think broadly speaking, it comes down to like, be like less concerned about opinions, be less concerned about like just stuff, and more risk taking. So like, don't worry that things aren't quite perfect, because overall it works out. So even though there's a bad moment or a hurtful moment or a sad moment, like, overall it works out. I'm not sure if I shared as well how like I don't know, I'll hold the emotion, remind me of the emotion thing in a minute, but yeah, what would your like future version say to you?
I don't know, probably trust your gut, because I don't know what my future version would necessarily look like. I think my journey's been interesting in the sense that I don't think I would have ever been able to predict 80+% of the stuff that I've got up to.
Yeah.
Through like job experiences or volunteering or people that I've bumped into or whatever. So it's quite difficult to say everything will work out in the end or whatever. Because for me right now, how things would work out would be very different to the future. So it's more like be present, trust your gut, and then through that things will work out, rather than things will just naturally work out.
Yeah, it makes sense, because I think being present is also something that I'd probably come back and tell myself as well. Because there's so much, again, depending on where we live, you might feel a different pressure, right? So for me in London, there's a little bit more like of a cultural pressure to be like on the go. And also because of our age demographic, there's a little bit more like, if you're not a CEO by 25, then you're in trouble, right? So there are different pressures from where you sit. And yeah, I think it's always a good perspective exercise to be like, what would you come and tell yourself, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about is emotions. How I heard somewhere, I'm not sure if I said it last week, but you shouldn't categorize emotions as good and bad. You should categorize them as uncomfortable emotions and comfortable emotions, because otherwise you demonize, you might say, oh, it's bad to be sad, when actually sadness is it might be uncomfortable, but from a processing perspective, a good thing to do. Like, trauma might be a bad thing, but if you think of it as negative, then you'll never basically process it, right? You'll never get up to the face of it and process it through.
Yeah, it's like the book that I've been reading recently about Permission to Feel, I think it's called, and it's basically talking about the mood meter. For those that are watching will see me put an iPad, and it's basically what zone are you in. So you've got energy levels on one side, and then you've got pleasantness. So that's basically what you're talking about. Is this opposite to you, or can you see this?
No, I can read it perfectly fine. So it's basically 4 squares, red, yellow, green, and blue, and each of them are a scale. So depending on where you are, you're either at the top or the top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. 4
and
quadrants.
then a second image gives you more wordings for those different areas.
So that breaks down the 4 into like 6 smaller boxes for each of the 4, which gives you more emotions, right?
Great maths, it's 9.
Oh.
Quick maths.
No, as in like 6 across and 6 down.
across.
So there's now, yeah. I was like, it is too early for maths, but as in like there's now multiple boxes.
Yeah. So it is an interesting
6 squared.
Going back to your pleasantness, there's also pleasantness, but then there's also energy levels. So you might have a quiet energy, which brings either a calmness or a sadness, or you might have a high energy, which is like joyfulness or anger or rage, as we've talked about on the pod before.
And we're working basically, so from the agency perspective, we've been slowly moving into products. So Insider, if you don't know what Insider is, it's basically the home of unreleased music, where music artists can create a sustainable living through subscriptions and their fans subscribing to their music, so they can release demos, behind the scenes, unreleased tracks. They can be pre-releases as well. So that's one product. The second product is our to-do list that we're working on. And what's special about the to-do list? Why are we creating a to-do list?
I think I've never found an app for me that works of juggling tasks, but also encouraging reward whilst completing tasks, but also helping you not get stuck on a task that either is too difficult because you've given too much of a vague comment, or unless you're physically stuck because something is out of your control. So it's bringing a bit more clarity of ownership of where's the ownership, pin it to that ownership and carry on. So if you're getting stuck of I'm stuck and I don't really, is it my problem or someone else's problem or whatever, and sometimes you overthink it and then actually it's something completely out of your control and you've wasted time and energy that you could have just gone stuck on this because of this, done, file it out, as if you're sort of getting it out of your out tray or whatever inbox.
And the reason why that's interesting is because if anybody's familiar with an organization called Access to Work, which is a governmental department of the Department of Work and Pensions, is it? They basically assist companies, employers with technology, software, and equipment to help employees be as efficient as they possibly can, given that they have some sort of kind of particular need to help them with. So they shift off a bunch of task tracking or task management software. They do transcribing stuff. They do screen readers. They do all sorts of stuff, right? So if we can build something that basically sits into that remit, we could potentially sell it into Access to Work, and have it cheaper because Access to Work sell or promote other applications that are like hundreds of pounds. So if we could sell something that was better, slightly better price range, then hopefully that could be a better alternative to suggest, rather than having Access to Work spending all this money. So it's reimbursed to you, but if you can have the government spending less money, then that's a good thing, right? So they can spend it on even greater impact, because we're taking the same impact but at a lower cost kind of level. I'm actually really excited about it. So because there's a really good need for it and a remit for it. So I think it'll be interesting to see when, because we're playing with it. Because how are you finding playing with it right now?
Yeah, it's good. I think I always expect having an idea as if you'll have like a dump of 200% motivation to run on and get it done. But I think that's one thing I've noticed is, even though you've come up with an idea, you're sort of in a tussle of, is this an idea that's going to work, or is it like the past that you might have tried to implement an idea but it's not quite worked? So actually there's this sort of half shadow boxing happening in your brain that you can't fully 100% go in. So it's like, okay, what is just one small step that I can just push it a little bit forward? I don't need 200% motivation to get it done. I just need to, what is the next thing? So what I've been doing is doodling more. So getting the print screens, putting them in Figma Jam stuff, and then literally just doodling on top, and then going back to the designs to then edit the designs. And that is enough just to break it down, to not feel like I'm always at a computer with a keyboard and stuff, and using sort of my weaker skills, rather than, actually I could doodle on it just to get the idea across to myself to then design it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the other thing is kind of like the emotional tracker. So do you want to share what, like, some of your thoughts around that and what you're kind of putting together on that side?
Yeah, I half thought it might be both in one, but I think you've gone and created it slightly separately. But I guess
this is where it's a conversation,
little bit of both. So I guess
it might be
fleshing
both.
that out. And at the end of the day, it's taking that mood meter idea of going, what zone are you in? Because you might not really know the different words or how to even communicate. Because that's one thing I've noticed with understanding emotion. You'll know if you've got high energy, low energy, or if you like the feeling or don't like the feeling. That's quite simple. So then when you zone into, okay, you're in 1/4 of a box, and then you're like, okay, that 1/4 then splits into 9 different words that then helps you communicate. Is there a way of you logging that on either, I don't know if it's just start of the day, end of the day, or maybe even just before every task, to be like, oh, my mood is slowly improving, or my mood is declining because actually I'm doing loads of jobs that I don't like, to see if we can do more of a task management via emotion. Which is the complete opposite, that normally it's task via mindset of, I need this done, so I'm going to do it if I like it or not. But I'm wondering if you could go more I guess it's probably more better for creative people, or maybe if you can't sack off your work or have enough money, it's more of an evening. How do you follow the rhythms of, okay, you've got high energy, so actually you're going to go and hoover the house because it's getting you walking about everywhere. And now you've got low energy, so now you're going to go and do some art because you can focus, to then help you just do the things that you want to do with a bit more ease, with an idea of taking you on that journey of knowing what you're feeling when. Is it reoccurring, to hopefully be a more preventative route to like anxiety, depression and stuff like that.
So basically you would have a some sort of a, hey, how are you feeling? You would say, I like the idea of saying that it's like you feel a color, you feel a particular color, because then there's less need for interpretation and translation. AKA, I assume that generally speaking, people know what feeling red is, and people know what feeling like blue is, and people know what feeling like kind of green is, right? And yellow, if we put in, or orange. And then it would be like a color range. And then you would say the intensity, because I think the other thing that people forget is like, cool, if you are feeling red or angry, to what degree are you feeling angry? You might be only feeling like an angry and like a number 2. which is like cool. And then actually it would be really interesting if it was like, cool, so you're feeling angry. Well, we've looked through your task list and we think that this is a creative task, which will basically be good to do when you're angry, because it'll be like, you just want to be creative, for example. And yeah, it's all about knowing yourself. I think one of the biggest like features that will be the most value though is if you shared your emotion tracker or mood tracker with somebody else, so then they could basically provide an additional support for you if you weren't always speaking to somebody and you were like, oh, I see that Tom's tracked a red, so let me go and chat to him. Or like, oh, he's tracked a red and it's 8, so like let me go and try. Or like, he's tracked a red and it's 2, well, that's okay, right? Like you might like self-soothe in that perspective, especially for like families and kids, because I guess kids take a bit of time to like understand their own emotions, let alone even adults take time to understand their own emotions, right? So.
Yeah, and it stops those people from going, how's your day? And then you're like, you just remembered the last thing that you did, that you might have went by a shop to get a chocolate bar, so you're like, yeah, it was a good day, when actually you might have been furious and angry all day, to then sadness, then you buy a chocolate bar because you're sad, and then now you're happy because you got a chocolate bar. It's sort of being a more holistic picture of your emotional journey of a day.
And I feel like we might have, I'm either having deja vu right now, or we did mention this on the last podcast, but yeah, I think the tracking of it over time, you'd then be like, cool, so I've been angry basically for 7 days and it's not let up and I'm still a level 10. Maybe I should kind of like do something about it, you know? So it's like all the like the preventative, because I think we probably mentioned last time about the importance of like emotional health first, which then can be a preventative measure over mental health. So that's kind of like an interesting like angle. Did you ever hear the thing when like a kid is having a tantrum, the best thing to do is basically mimic them, because that is the quickest way for them to understand that you understand them. So if they're crying and kicking and stuff, if you do exactly the same, then that like resonates, rather than trying to calm them down. And also probably rather than like hugging them, because you want to like first relate, then the second action can be whatever it is, right? But the first is like, how do you help a kid understand that you like get them? Well, maybe you should also cry, right? And then it'd be like, oh, cool, my parents crying, I'm crying, there's a synergy. And then it like clicks them out of it to be like, what's going on here? And then you'd be like, do you want a hug? And they'd be like, cool, do you want a hug? Or like, you know, whatever the secondary action is. I've never seen that in motion as such yet, but I'd like to see what that
parenting
is.
top tips from non-parents.
Yeah, non-parenting top tips. Well, ultimately, before you get into a stage, you always have to research it, right? So before you get married, you read about marriage. Before you get engaged,
you just have to like
or whatever.
Push a kid over, let them cry, and then you can cry next and see what works.
Yeah, that's one way of crying outside of your dreams.
I just push a kid.
Yeah, don't worry, social experiment, you know, so long as you shout social experiment everywhere, then it'd be like acceptable to be doing things to test it out. But yeah, I think it's I'm looking forward not to kind of use this as a scientist lab of some sorts, but just to be like, yeah, I think parenting now is going to be so different than it was previously, because there's more wisdom, there's more understanding, there's more psychology, there's more everything, and all that information is accessible. But then there's sometimes too much information, because psychologists, writers, they always need to come up with their new angle, right? Because isn't there somebody saying now, hey, don't care about calories? What was that? Yeah. Did you watch that thing? Like, everybody needs to come up with their thing, and a lot of the time confrontation or something negative will get you more attention, right?
I think the difficulty thing is like, let's say, for example, food and how people view food. 80% is probably correct to some degree. But what about those 20% of people that counting calories or not counting calories, or eating bread, loses weight, gains weight for other people? I think it's those more intricate, personal, one-to-one touches. It's like having a one-to-one personal trainer over having like a generic
catch-all.
class catch-all. Yeah. And I think that's what it feels like that's where the world is going, a little bit more of a the only things I can think about food-wise is like a Subway model of you're picking your toppings compared to like a McDonald's of you're picking off their menu. Okay, now you can tweak stuff and go, actually, I don't want XYZ in my burger to make it a little bit, but they make it sort of a little bit more difficult to customize it to make it simpler for them. Rather than going through imagine if you went through a Subway process with your mind, through your emotions, through your work, through your finances or whatever, it'll probably come out completely different to friends, family or whatever, which is completely fine, rather than a catch-all of, do you want a burger or a hot dog? Which I think that was more like primary school food options. This or this, and those are your two options, or starve. But now obviously there's like vegetarian, vegan, there's fish options, there's
the personalization. The personalization mechanism has gone like nth degree thanks to things like AI. There was even like people pronounce it NVIDIA, don't they, or NVIDIA? NVIDIA had this. So they're basically a graphics card, or like GPUs. Are they like? I think they're all sorts of computer hardware, basically. And they were showing a computer game where somebody walked into a bar and you were able to speak with the character behind the bar. And the character behind the bar was all driven by AI. So his reactions and stuff were triggered by what he was saying and also what he was hearing. So you could speak to the character behind the bar and they would instantly answer back uniquely to what you say.
That's cool.
I was thinking, so there's two routes that you go down this thing, right? One, you can use it in a good way, and one, you can use it in a bad way. So we can talk about like dating models, right? AI models and dating like replicas and virtual people, which is one way of personalizing basically connection. And then the second way is like, if you could programmatically give characters in like a historical scene, and you put on your headset or you put on your game, you're basically chatting with, Martin Luther King or Henry VIII or, anybody of a famous-ish or historic-ish kind of like scope. Then you could build a historic scene and have that as the interaction of like learning about the world wars or whatever, by like going into a situation, into a particular like escape room type thing, where you're speaking with the characters, which are all AI generated. So you can ask them questions like, oh, how many wives did you have? And it's like, oh, I had, and it's able to answer like very specifically to what you're asking it. I think that'd be a really cool, like historical tool. But then, the flip side of these people getting married to AIs is like personalization gone a bit crazy, because computers are always going to be better at personalizing, because it can show more empathy. It can show, greater understanding than a human can, more consistently all the time, because there is no energy up and down, right? Like there is no, there is no emotional state for itself, so it can always be there to assist and help. But then the next question is, like, how do we as Christians use that? How, like, what does the church do with all this stuff? Did you see the Jesus stream? Did you see that stuff?
No, I didn't. What was it?
So someone's deep faked this Jesus character, which is basically this guy doing this a lot and speaking. And every time it's a Twitch stream, every time people ask Jesus questions in the comments, it will answer the questions based on obviously the knowledge that it's been given around the Bible and stuff. And it also has contextual knowledge to understand that, hey, Cat's Eyes 22, thanks for asking the question. Like, you've also asked questions about, is it okay to, blah, blah, blah. And it can recite what questions that person has asked. Or it's like, oh, thanks, Cat's Eyes 22. You've asked questions similar to, Snake Eyes 11 or whatever it is. And it's like listing off these names. And then it's basically saying stuff. And it's a way of people engaging with Christianity in your own setting, in your own home, and asking it questions and stuff. Now, I put it on in my like small group, which is just my midweek group that we have, and people were so fascinated with it. It was just like on for ages, and it's just going through like answering all these questions that are being raised. And it's one way of just like introducing any subject or any topic for it to be interrogated and kind of asked and challenged in a way more engaging way. So just imagine if that was like a history lesson. That's the only thing that I can kind of, or even a science lesson, right? Or a biology lesson or anything. If we're all in these kind of like virtual environments where we're able to ask particular people about things, then maybe that would be way more engaging. And then it's like, well, you're not limited by the teacher's understanding or the teacher's knowledge in that moment. So then the people that are really interested, they could ask those questions, and the people that are not interested, they don't need to ask those questions. But yeah, I think that's the future.
Very interesting.
Elon Musk. Yeah, go on.
I think it's that difficulty of knowing how do you, I guess, where does the power then go to? Because in the past, it was probably always with the teachers because they were the only ones that can read or whatever. And then obviously now everyone can read and get information. It's like, cool. But now let's say AI can even recite stuff and things. It's like, will it be like, oh, I've spotted that you've joined this membership with your credit card the last 2 weeks or whatever. It's like, then it goes the extreme way, the other way of, oh, you've been joining a live chat that you pay for because then it makes you feel like you want connection. But this is a way of getting connected or whatever. It's going, how would you be able to guardrail, I guess, regulate? But then the difficulty is are you then handing over the power to, okay, instead of the president's got power, it's the regulator that takes control of the most powerful AI systems that people are listening to, which is interesting. But yeah, what were you going to say about Elon Musk?
So on the education thing, the whole like kids working in teams to solve problems is a really interesting methodology or approach on education, which I think makes sense, and real life problems. Because I remember there was this, I used to work at a digital agency where the accountant was an old maths teacher, and he said like, he used to make maths really interesting. So he was like, cool, Pythagoras. Why the heck do you need Pythagoras? Like, I don't recall. But he was like, if you buy a wardrobe and you're trying to fit it through a door, you need to know Pythagoras to get it through the door. So he would like rationalize all these theories into like usable, actionable things. So yes, you're going to buy at some point as an adult, you're going to buy some IKEA furniture, or you're going to try and move some furniture. So let's use Pythagoras to figure out if we can move this sofa into the next room through this door or whatever it is. And I think that's so more like way more interesting as like a concept. Yeah, it makes it more real. And then the other thing I'll say, the negative side of AI is there's a company in China that basically has developed a facial recognition software that if you're holding up a banner like protesting, and it basically snaps your faces and then sends those faces to the government or sends the faces to the police. And also because they have like a social credit system, in the sense of like, if you perform well, we'll give you more social credits, and if you perform badly, we'll give you less social credits. It'll be attached to their WeChat accounts, which basically is their they do everything through WeChat. Yeah, it's WhatsApp, but they also do their banking and they pay for stuff through WeChat. It would be attached to that, and they would instantly be able to close down your account because they see you holding a poster of like, we don't like what the government's doing, or like end lockdowns or whatever. So there's definitely the both sides.
Matrix side of things.
Yeah. That's why it's important to like get in at the ground level to understand this stuff, so that you can demand the right guardrails. Otherwise, the people at the top will put guardrails for their benefits, right? Hopefully not, but you know. So it's very, very interesting. The NVIDIA guy in the speech, sorry, I'm running hot. The NVIDIA guy in his speech to some university students, I'm not sure if it was in Taiwan, but he was like saying that his like final closeout sentence was like, don't walk, run. If you are hungry, you'll run for food. And if you're not hungry, then you are the food. So you've got to run because you are the food. He will have said it in a way more succinct way, but nonetheless, run. Like, which I thought was funny. And he then tied that into like run with AI.
Was he on the
like,
stage sharing this?
Yeah, it was like
Did he
a
then run off the
university
stage? Because that
It would have been funny if he did, right?
Yeah.
Like, that would have been his exit mode, like run.
Yeah, because if he didn't, he missed it. Yeah,
That's one way to like solidify something. You'd also probably put people into panic because he's running off the stage in that way. But yeah, I think it's such a cool time to be alive, with all these advancements of technology and stuff, and that we are aware of them and can utilize them in positive ways to bring about positive change. Like one of the biggest things is like, you know, the advancements in being able to solve illnesses or conditions, because we can run what do they call it, like experiments at like a higher degree, because we've got AI that can kind of like do a bunch of prototypes of things. And,
I spotted that the other day that they figured out a cure with the power of AI. I think it was on the news the other day, which was quite cool. I think it was like a quite complex one. So that's the thing, you just chuck it, let the computer do the heavy lifting, and yeah, it is quite cool if they come up with loads of different medicine. But then obviously it's difficult, because then if pharmacies found out that, oh, one pill cures you for 20 years, it's like, oh, could you collapse a whole industry with the power of AI at the same time? So it is very interesting.
And hold it to ransom, right? Because one, you've come up with these new things that do eradicate diseases, which you then put a price on, versus everything's always a money game, because pharmaceutical companies are all private, so they're all driven by shareholder value, which means that they want to make more money. So it's always a difficult thing. But yeah, AI is very fascinating, and I'm glad that I'm not on the scared spectrum. I'm on the like, let's engage with this. So you don't need to be scared, because you understand it, and you understand the full breadth of the impact of the negative side. So then you can kind of like put in the guardrails and figure out what you want to like stand for and stuff. It's always about engaging with it. But what would you say, going back to the church and the Jesus thing, what would you say for like people using that? Because you could write a preach using AI. Does that then lose its impact or not?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, because it's one of those things that I think it probably diminishes the power of teaching, but I would say it probably doesn't diminish the power of, let's say, like pastoral care. Because I think the difference thing is with AI, you can say, what is the main point about Genesis? Do a preach on that. Very specific and very succinct. It will do a way better job than me. But if it was like, how do you help this person through grieving, and they don't know how they're feeling, so you sort of have to read their body language, well, it's not quite got there until it can, unless there is something out there already, until it can read the tones of your voice and your body language and that type of thing. Unless you know you really well and have perfect words, then fair enough, you can be like, I'm struggling with grief from a sadness point of view. How would you get me out of it with a 6-month plan? Then it might help you in that regards. But I think there's more of a journeying pastoral care side that I would say probably doesn't get removed quite the same as, let's say, teaching or even evangelism, because being able to feel like you're speaking with Jesus, that's just interesting. Like, how do you just make it church just generally more interesting and more engaging, save as doing just the same thing that we've done for many years?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I think people are genuinely interested in sort of new ideas and stuff like that, and conveying things in different ways. Like the church nearly had a heart attack when people used to bring guitars and pianos in. But now it's like, it makes sense to have that. But really, it's like, why are we bringing other stuff in? Like DJ sets or loop pedals or whatever. Why do we have to stop at the piano? But that's the thing. It's just going, what is around there, and how can you just be creative with the tools that's around you?
And the challenge is, like, going back to the comments that we said about personalization, the challenge is when you're speaking to a room of people, there's so much nuance, and you've come into a room with some sort of experience. You've come into the room with probably, like, you know, you rush, you're not really focusing. So I wonder if future is you walk into a room, there's 100 VR headsets, you plug it in, you say how you're feeling today and whatever, and then it can basically give you a 10-minute video generated preach, which is like perfectly based on your learning style, your personality. And then you would be like, cool, I basically am encouraged. I know how to be a better person. You go out into the world. Like, is that going to be the future, as in all this personalization? Because it doesn't necessarily diminish the... It doesn't... I don't know. I guess it doesn't diminish the kind of the feel-good factors and the emotions. You can feel emotions through it. You can feel encouraged by stuff. I guess it's the spirituality aspect that it can't necessarily reenact, but it can trigger. I think it can trigger a like an encounter by surfacing stuff, right? Surfacing stuff in a particular way that's all about bringing a sense of encouragement to you. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and ultimately it's about not being afraid and engaging with it, as we've always said. Engage with new stuff, wrestle with it and figure it out a bit.
So get running.
Yeah, and this is where we run off the podcast.
I would if these weren't in the way. I
was like, I'm going to knock a bunch of stuff over, and I'm going to have to come back and press stop anyway. All right, until next time, keep hammering those nails and running.